Hey there, and welcome to That News You Care About, a weekly video game news show from the folks over at That Nerdy Site. Today is Saturday, May 1st, 2021, and I'm one of your hosts, Logan Wilkinson. Joining me this week is my Phoenix son, Trevor Starkey.
Very special episode this week.
Yeah, very, very special one. The biggest Jets fan west of the Mississippi, Cameron Abbott.
Hey, what's going on, nerds?
What's going on, Cam? And friend of the pod, creator of the Emily's Away series, and, unfortunately, general Boston sports fan, Kyle Seeley.
Hey, everyone.
Wow.
Hey, Kyle.
The shade.
How you doing today, Kyle?
Pretty good.
Yeah, so this is going to be a special, fun, Emily's Away-centric episode, obviously with Kyle on, and just Kyle-centric episode. Myself, Cam, and Trev all have questions, thoughts, opinions, I'm sure, about Emily's Away 3 or Forever. There's a debate about how you even pronounce the game's title.
Less than 3.
Less than 3 was also one that popped up, yes.
Yeah.
So we'll uncover all of these questions and answers, but I'm going to throw it over first off for the first question, if no one has anything else.
Well, I was going to say, blanket
What do
spoiler
you got?
warning for
We're
Emily's Away.
Yeah,
going to
for
spoil
this
the
series.
shit out. Yeah, we're going to spoil the whole series, all the games. You should have played them. So if you haven't, pause it right here, a minute and a half into the podcast, leave, come back after you played the game, and then listen to all of our thoughts and opinions on it. But without further ado, Trevor, I'm going to throw it to you for the first question, first thoughts. I'm throwing you into the deep end there. What do you got?
All right, I have a handful. The first one I have in my little notepad doc here is, why do you like to hurt us, Kyle? But before I dive into that one, just kind of going off of the name conversation we just had, also, your camera is looking really funky.
I know,
there,
it's because
Logan,
the
with the
sun
lighting.
glares hitting my thing. I'll be back. Trevor, ask the question.
Stylistic choice.
So on the naming of the game, I guess, like, how do you consider the name of the game? And B, when you did name it, were you aware that YouTube hates angle brackets in its titles and descriptions?
Yeah, so when I say it, I just say Emily's Away 3, and I was not aware that YouTube hates it. Because, yeah, I tried to put it in for, like, the reveal trailer or whatever, and it was just like, nope.
Yep.
And I was like, oh, shit.
Yeah. It pulls up fine in the, like, if you go in and select gaming and then, as the category and then say, like, what game are you playing? Like, you can select it from there, so kudos to you on however that happens and works out. But yeah, trying to put Emily's Away less than 3 in the description and or the title is always, like, a problem. So I'm like, well, I'll put that everywhere else I can, and then I'm just going to take out the angle bracket.
Yeah, that's what I do, too.
Yeah, I have to. That was a problem for me as well when I was doing editing on the videos. For whatever reason, like the codec wouldn't accept the bracket with, like, the beginning bracket without an end bracket. And so, like, I was just like, So I have. So that was a fun thing I learned as well.
So back to the other question of, why do you like to hurt us,
Yeah.
so Kyle?
Like,
Just to fill you in case you hadn't listened to our spoiler cast on it, we all initially played through and pretty much got variations of the Emily putting us on a break ending. I think Cam and I think both made the decision to just kind of, like, end the relationship there, but I think Logan
break up.
kind of stayed with the break. I then went through and played and got an Evelyn ending, and got a good Evelyn ending where, like, we stay together at the end. But, like, in that, I had to basically, like, pretend I was Matt and confront Steve, and I feel kind of dirty because now the relationship is, like, built on that lie or whatever, or that lie of omission. So, like, yeah, why do you hurt us?
Yeah, I think it's kind of cool the situations you can put people in with these kind of games, and the impetus behind the whole thing is, like, the ending you guys all got is the ending that I think most people get, where it's you're very trusting and then it doesn't work out.
Yeah.
But that's like a real life situation that people go through all the time, right? So that was kind of
that was my, like, last real relationship. It had a very, very similar tone to it of the girl and I were together.
Kyle went too real, yeah.
Very much so, because about a month after we broke up, she started seeing this guy who had become, like, a really good friend of hers, and now they're married in Seattle or something like that. So it was like, ooh, way too close to the heart.
directly for you, yeah.
Yeah, it was quite biting for Trevor. No, I like that. This has always been such a fascinating thing that I really loved it because I know that you did it with the last game as well. The like how many percentage of people like
Got these
chose
endings.
got this ending or made this decision. And I did find like, yeah, okay, a lot of people ended up like, a lot of people default because of Emily is Way 1, where like your first playthrough is probably always going to go for Emily, I feel. But yeah, no, for Trevor and I to both make that decision, I actually almost ended up in my initial playthrough with it, like I almost got into the break situation, but eventually I was just like, I just can't do that. Like that's just, I can tell what you want and you're not being honest about what you want. And anyway, it sounds so personal. It sounds so personal. And it was like just less than 5 hours of my life. And yet when I talk about it, it's like, this was like a long period of relationship that I was in when if people hear us talk about this game, and that's what it sounds like. And it's nuts. How do you why do you hurt us, Kyle?
Well, I think that's the big thing too about it is, yeah, it is like a small story, but I think that it's very open to interpretation. So a lot of people will relate their own personal lives into it, and then for them it becomes very personal because it's not Emily that they're talking about anymore. It's like this person that they used to know, or so a lot of people will relate their personal stuff into it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
I think one of the big questions I had that I've talked a lot about to a few people who played it was the fact that it's interesting that this was the first game in the series where you're not really chasing after the girls much, right? Certainly for me, for Trev, and for Cam, I think we had started dating Emily by the second chapter of the game, right? And it's the first one that is more of a relationship game than trying to get her to go out with you to begin with. And I found that change really interesting, and I think the way you explored that, like actually kind of getting the girl, what does it look like, right? Like the happily ever after ending that you wanted for the first two games, how does it happen, right? Or was that something that you really were curious to explore after the first few games in the series?
Yeah, for sure. And it's really interesting that you picked up on that because that was a major idea coming into this game because it's a whole new platform, right? So Emily's Away 1 and 2 would take place on an instant messenger, which is more about like intimate relationships between two people. And this one takes place on Facebook, so it's very much about your whole friend group. So I really wanted to go into this game with the idea of like, yes, there's relationships that happen, but I also wanted to put a lot of focus on your friends. So specifically like the Matt character, and how that friendship kind of grows and changes over the course of the entire game. And yeah, like I knew that because of I wanted that friction at the end of maybe this person that you're with wants to move on from you, and like what do you do in that kind of situation? Do you just kind of like let it happen and be trusting, or do you kind of be toxic and maybe set an ultimatum or something? So in order for that to happen, the relationship needs to happen a lot earlier in the story. So that was kind of the idea behind that.
Yeah, I think it was really interesting for me to kind of tap into that point because when we did our spoiler cast too, we kind of talked about the idea of it being really kind of a genius that maybe the quote-unquote good ending where you end the game with Emily or Evelyn can only be achieved in a sort of toxic or not great way by either confronting someone else by masquerading as someone else's Facebook profile, or by kind of giving an ultimatum, or by like saying they can't hang out with a friend anymore, and again kind of exploring this idea of what actually is the good ending versus what actually is the bad ending, and kind of subverting that expectation.
Yeah, because I think when you hear good ending a lot, it usually just means gets the girl, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But like through what means did you obtain that ending, right? So to me, the good ending is the ending that you all got, where this other person who is clearly moving on, you like let them move on, and you kind of gracefully exit, because you don't want to be in a relationship with someone who doesn't have those feelings for you. But then to other people, they might consider the good ending of just being together. So they'll be toxic, or they'll do anything they can to be with that other person. And so I think that's kind of an interesting question to explore.
Yeah.
Well, it's also really interesting because by the nature of Facebook, and you actually touch on this in chapter, I want to say it's chapter 4, where you do make the decision to like pretend to be Matt or not. You play with the nature of Facebook, at least the way Facebook definitely was back then, of if you're not friends with somebody, you don't see what gets posted on their wall, even if your friend posted on their wall. And so having people like Steve or, you know, any of these guys Jeff, like these people like that you have, you can't see what's going on. And so like when Matt's like, dude, she's flirting, it's like, Matt, like, I trust, like, it's fine. Like, I know things didn't work. Like, we're like the perfect couple. It's fine. Don't worry about it. And then just for it, like, you start off that chapter saying like, we're like this great couple. And then you can quickly devolve into this super toxic angle in the story by just like having that trust breakdown. And you like, I found myself really engaged with the feelings of jealousy. Like, I trust you, but at the same time, I'm jealous. How do I balance these feelings, these emotions? And I was like, this is wild that this game is making me feel this way. Because like real relationships make me feel this way. I don't know how to feel about that.
Yeah, when Matt was like, log in as me, I was like, I do not want to do this. I do not want to do this at all. Do not make me do this, Kyle. And you did, and I was like, this is one of the most uncomfortable things I've done in a game. And like, especially like when it goes back out to login screen, I'm like, I don't even remember what his login thing was.
That's
so
what
I guess
like,
I can just log back in as myself.
Yeah.
Oh, nope. Kyle did that thing, of course, where he's going to take over my keyboard. Why did I not see that coming? So yeah, I was very, like, first time out, I was like, oh, I feel so gross and so dirty about this. And then the next time around, I was like, well, I'm just going to try and play a very different way. And so I was like completely leaning into it. I still didn't like admit it was me, but I was like pretending to be very angry as Matt or something like that about the whole like Evelyn thing. And so yeah, it was a very like I start thinking back to like early days of Facebook, and did I ever do that like myself? Did I like have friends that like helped me out or something? And like I might have, but I've blocked those things out because because they're from a part of my life where I'm just like I don't even like looking back at that guy. So like the fact that you made me go back and like maybe relive some of that, I was like, trauma, no, bad. But it was like a very ingenious like approach, especially because it was a great payoff to like Matt getting the other like character, which I thought in chapter 3, I'm like, am I getting catfished here? Is this like Kelly set up a fake Matt profile to like get some dirt out of me or something like that? So I don't know if that was like an intentional like direction you were taking it, but that was like my initial pull on it. It's very fascinating, like playing through the game and then like looking back and seeing like how wrong I was in some things. And it's especially fun watching Cameron play through the game in his Let's Plays, which we've got 3 of them up on the site as of right now. And just watching his like relationship with Matt just like in his own mind just break, and he's like, oh man, what the hell, Matt, like why are you doing this? And then he finds out like Kelly actually broke up with Matt, and he's like, wait, what? But then he immediately like turns on Kelly again or something. It's been a very
Kelly
entertaining.
Changed, all right, Kelly changed.
There's been a whole thing over the word chow in our group chats.
Oh god,
and
yeah,
stuff.
that's the worst.
Isn't it the worst? It's the worst.
All right, don't vindicate Cameron on this, Kyle.
Yes, vindication. I had to deal with everybody be like, I can't, like, deuces is worse than chow. I was like, there's no way deuces is a way douchier thing than saying chow. Chow is the douchiest way to say goodbye
I was like,
is.
what is the douchiest goodbye I could come up with? And it was chow.
All right, Cameron wins this round.
All right. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that whole flip is very intentional. Because I think you start the game off when you're just talking to Matt, right? And I think when people start playing these kinds of games with like narratives and choices, they really want to push the boundaries. So they're kind of like maybe being more of a jerk to Matt, or like saying kind of like rude things. And that kind of makes Matt the punching bag character. But really, by the end of the game, I wanted Matt to turn into like your best friend. Mm-hmm. And so that's why the relationship with Kelly kind of breaks down. You get to see Matt at like a really low point, and it's up to you to maybe build him back up. And now you kind of feel bad for him. He's not the punching bag anymore, and he's always there for you. So it kind of changes that relationship dynamic.
Yeah, I think that was all of us. I don't know if this is what you were gonna say, Logan, but like all of us were really like impressed and wowed by like, okay, things with Emily have died basically on the vine, and then like Matt comes in there and is there for us, and just like had this beautiful little like closing conversation to end out the game. And then I ended up really missing that when I got the Evelyn good ending. The 0.2% of players got this ending where it was just like, oh, like you and Evelyn are gonna like continue on, and then like I was waiting for Matt to chime in and be like, hey man, how you doing, like we should hang out or something, and then he didn't, and I was like, oh no, but I still like Matt too.
The good ending is the ending where you choose to go out after the breakup or the whatever decision you make, and then the last picture is a picture of you and like either Matt's on your back or you're on Matt's back, and that is the good ending of this game.
Yeah, I think
we thought we were playing it for the romantic relationships. We were playing it for the friendship. Unless, Kyle, you're telling me there's a secret fourth ending where we end up with Matt. In which
there
case,
isn't a Matt ending, but there should be, honestly.
Yeah.
A lot of people have been saying that they want one.
DLC, man. It's a thing. Put it out. DLC. Let's go.
That was the thing for me playing it that I kind of touched on, was the fact that, like, playing through the game and, like, Matt's there at the end, and I was like, oh, Matt's such a bro, right? I had so many Matt friends, and I said this almost for, like, because you were like, yeah, like, Matt's cool. Like, we're friends, but, like, I wouldn't have called him, like, my best when, like, we were first starting the game up. And then, like, over time, seeing his arc in the game, right? And I touched on this in the spoiler cast, too, where, like, Matt, to me, is, like, low-key the most important character in the whole thing. Like, he turns and he pivots so many of the arcs every other character is having, right? And he's, like, always there. And the way he weaves in and out, that, like, by the end, I was like, damn, Matt's actually the one who's ride or die. And then it made me be like, fuck, I'm kind of the shitty friend to Matt, because I kept being like, like, he's, like, fine. Like, I kind of believe that he'd be shitty, and I believe that he would do this. And it's like, the whole time he kept proving me wrong, and it's like, oh, man, I'm the, maybe I don't deserve Matt. Like, maybe he's too good for me, right? And, like, yeah, like, especially his whole final conversation with you, I thought was so beautiful, right? And, like, I thought the way he summed up your and Emily's, or Evelyn's, relationship, and that whole final line of, like, you know, you trusted Emily, you believed in her, right? Like, that has to mean something, right? Like, maybe she doesn't deserve you, right? And, like, I really loved that idea of, like, what if this whole time the girl you've been chasing, the girl you've been with, like, what if she's not as great as you kind of think she was, right? Like, so much of what I like about this game is how it kind of subverts and twists what we've been built to think after, you know, 3 games in the series, and of, like, why are we chasing Emily? Right? It kind of makes you ask her, like, why do we want to be with her, right? Like, is she actually the right person for us, right? And I think Matt is coming and clutching me, like, look, like, if you trusted her, if you had faith in her, if you believed in her to the end, like, you did everything right, and, like, if she doesn't want to be with you, like, you know, at the end of the day, that's on you, right? And I think that conversation summed up so much of, like, the entire series arc for me. It was like, oh, man, that's a really good, that was just a great final moment with him.
And he also, like, totally vindicates, like, your feeling, especially because if you choose to break up with her, he totally vindicates the whole, like, what Emily was asking for as far as, like, a relationship goes is not what he has going on, and she knows that, and she was trying to use that. I'm like, and then that moment caused me to actually look back, and I realized, oh my gosh, I've been in a toxic relationship this entire time. Emily has just been knew how to, because we were best friends, she knew how to play me, and she was able to use me. And I looked back and I went through, like, my choices and dialogue with layers, her, and I'm like, this, like, she, like, I was being abused in a toxic relationship, and she knew that, and she wanted to, like, that was such a, like, not to that extent of, like depth of depravity in that part, but, like, to look back and be like, oh, I was the good guy that everybody likes in the relationship, and she's the bad person that nobody likes after the relationship. Great. I got all the friends in that relationship divorce. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Also, because I ended up, like, still being, like, best friends with Evelyn, and Kelly and I, like, reconnected and became friends again, which is great, you know? You know, she's going to go to Boston to her photography school, whatever.
Yeah, so, like, this game's pretty personal, and it comes from like a personal experience that I've had going through breakups, and having friends there be like kind of the superheroes of the situation. Like they're your rock, you know.
Yeah.
They'll take you through it, and they're kind of always there for you. And when you're in a relationship, you don't necessarily realize that until the relationship ends, and then you realize that like, oh, like this person's now out of my life, but all these people have been here this whole time to like kind of support me. And so that's kind of one of the messages of the Emily 3 game, to take you through the end and have Matt be that like rock at the end. And so I'm glad that you guys all had that reaction to it, because that's definitely something I was trying to put into it.
I'm curious too, because it was something that I caught note of, the fact that, again, assuming you get the ending where you and Emily either go on a break or break up, this is the first game where the first person, the last person you talk to is not Emily or Evelyn, right? Like it's very, to me, it felt like a very conscious decision to make it be Matt and make it be someone who's you're not romantically involved in any way, right? And make it be, it is about your friends, right? And this game, I think I touched on it with Trevor in the spoiler cast, had that theme of the fact that like this is the first game too where on that note you kind of get a epilogue of sort almost, right? Like in the first two games, if you don't end up with Emily or Evelyn, the game just ends and it's like, man, I'm really sad. That just left on a really bad note. And this one, it's like, hey, you know, you still have Matt there to kind of comfort you, and you still have like the barbecue that you can go to at the end of summer, right? And you still have like I think it showed you for the first time, like, yeah, life goes on after a high school breakup or any breakup, right? Like it keeps moving, and it's hard, but like I like the fact that even with getting kind of the quote unquote like bad ending of not ending up with, you know, Emily or Evelyn, you still get a really nice final image of like all of you together in summer kind of a thing. Or was that like a conscious decision on your part to kind of give it that extra
for
epilogue?
sure. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's one of the things about 1 and 2 is that a lot of people would end the game and they would come away with a lot of messages or thoughts and like not really know where their emotions were going. And like I've had people play the first game and be like, oh man, like Emily's such a jerk, like she's such a bitch. And it's like, well, maybe not. Maybe she was like trying to figure stuff out on her own. And so having that like,
and you taking advantage of her by bringing her to your room and getting her drunk and then making out with her and hooking up with her maybe was not the right move, dude.
Right, exactly. So
to
Matt's
be fair,
there.
I didn't know I did that though, because that all happened in between our year-long absences of AIM.
So the Matt character is there to kind of like help frame the ending, and like you were talking about earlier when he's talking about your decisions and how you trusted her and like how that means something. Like maybe it didn't work with Emily, but that desire to be trusting and to be faithful is not a bad thing.
Yeah.
It's definitely a conscious choice to have Matt be there to like help digest what just happened.
One of the things I appreciate, kind of echoing Logan's comment about like the subversion of this game compared to the other two, especially hot off the heels of playing Emily is Away 2 for the first time right before we dove into Emily is Away 3. If my own Let's Plays ever kind of make the light of day, I'm constantly kind of turning to the camera throughout Emily is Away 3 and saying, all right, Kyle, when are you going to fuck me? How are you going to fuck me on this? Because that was very much
his
like
name's Jeff.
I'm talking to Kyle, the developer that we are speaking to right now. Is
no. But the way he fucks you, his name is Jeff.
Yeah, your because the ending of Emily is Away 2 of like the two girls got together and then went through like 4 months of chat logs or something is like, all right, calm down, because I said one thing that even I still argue is like I was vague enough in both of my cases that like I'm not saying what you think I said, but whatever, fine, Emily, you want to end this, fine. And so I appreciated the subversion of getting into chapter 5 and like kind of getting the sense that things are different between me and Emily, and like piecing together, oh, we're just gonna have the same kind of ending that like Matt and Kelly had like 3 chapters ago. It's not going to be some big like I can't believe you, like there wasn't gonna be a gotcha moment in this one. And I was like, I basically settled in and prepared myself for kind of for not having that, and I was very kind of pleased when it was just we've just kind of grown apart, or Jeff is, you know, whatever Jeff is doing in the picture, fine, whatever. But yeah, it was like it wasn't. I liked that there wasn't like I didn't say the wrong thing to somebody 3 chapters ago, and now it's coming back to bite me in the ass. Like, I'm sure in the string coding of everything, there's something like that going on. But I appreciate it wasn't like just laid out in that same way, the way that it had been in Emily's Way too.
Yeah, and I think that kind of an ending is also a very realistic thing
Yeah.
that happens to relationships all the time. Is that people change or expectations change, and maybe you weren't the same as you used to be, so stuff kind of just ends or kind of just falls apart. And there's not really ever. Sometimes there's not like that big moment of like, oh, you said this thing and now we're over. It's more of a general vibe and feeling, and things just kind of come to pass.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for me, that was the whole final chapter, I think. And I touched on this a little bit before, the fact that, like, I think this is the most emotionally mature of the 3 games in terms of just how it's dealing with its themes, right? In terms of how it's dealing with the breakup and the fact that it is so focused on the relationship that, yeah, getting to that point, and I think playing through it, it's almost easy at times to forget the fact that these are all high school seniors. And they're in such a, like, in a very real way. Or like,
They're 18-year-olds, yeah.
Yeah, and it's in such a hugely, like, pivotal year in their life where, like, so much is constantly changing. And, like, it is totally natural, right, for one or both of you to get to that end of the year and be like, I don't know even what I'm doing or who I am at this point in time in my life, like, where I'm going, what I'm going to do in a week after I graduate from high school. And for, me as a player character to be like, I mean, I'm doing fine, I'm doing great, like, I'm totally down to just keep going, but her to be like, well, like, I don't even know what I want to do with my life, right? Like, I don't know who I want to be or where I want to live. And I think her voicing those concerns and frustrations, right? Because for me, the end of the relationship felt like a very authentic, real dialogue. Like, it was an actual back and forth being like, yeah, like, how do you feel, and how do you feel on this, and like, where are you kind of at, and like, how's your head on this topic, right? And like, we had a really genuine dialogue, it felt like that. So when we did get to that point of like, yeah, like, I don't know where we are right now, right? And like, that answer and that kind of statement felt real to the context of where we had kind of been building leading up to everything else we talked about in chapter 5, and then the ramifications of it afterwards of going, all right, yeah, so what do we do next, right? Like, what do we look like, and is this the thing that we can keep going? I think was tackled in such a, like, subtle and mature way that, like, I got to the end of the game. And again, I told this to Trevor, I think, and Cam on the spoilercast, where, like, this is the first game where it's like, I have no regrets, right? Like, all the conversations I had, I felt good with, right? And they felt real, and they felt so fulfilling, even if I was unhappy with how they went at the same time, which is, like, a thing that I find so common in relationships, where it's like, I'm not happy with how that went, but like, also, like, I wouldn't do anything differently either, right? Like, that's what I felt in the moment, right? And that's how I was thinking, and that's how Emily or Evelyn was thinking as well. And so that whole final sequence between the 2 characters in chapter 5 just felt like such a natural evolution from 1 and 2. And I wonder if, in your mind, that felt like were like the logical next step to take the series from those first 2 games.
I think for every subsequent game that I've made, it's been almost a reaction to the previous game.
Mm-hmm.
So from 2 to 1, because 1 was kind of billed as a dating sim, so I kind of didn't really like that moniker. So for 2 is kind of a repudiation of that idea where, like, if you're just the sporty guy to the sporty girl, you'll get the sporty girl. Because 2 plays with the idea of, like, if you're a different person to each romantic interest, then that's how you get the bad ending. And then for 3, it's definitely a reaction to 2 of, like, yeah, like a more emotionally mature representation of what a relationship is and how a relationship is progressed. Because, like you're saying at the beginning, is that 3 is really about, okay, you're in a relationship in chapter 2, so it's kind of about the trials and tribulations that a relationship goes through over time, more so than, like, yeah, you're together with her now.
Yeah.
That's the end, So it's definitely a reaction to my past games.
Question I had for you, especially having played part of the game at PAX and stuff, is how did the game change over development, especially the last year of the pandemic, obviously. In particular, I feel like I remember at PAX's playing, the during the profile setup, you had kind of those staples of the other games of, like, hey, choose some movies that you like, and you can add those little things that I noticed just weren't there in the final game. So I'm curious if those were cut for, development hell reasons, or if it was just you wanted to kind of break away and pare the experience down.
So, yeah, the game's changed a lot since its original inception. Specifically, that feature, that was something that I had to take out at the request of Steam to distribute on Steam.
Really?
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So they said they were worried about third-party legality issues, so they asked for that to be removed. So that was fun.
Can't just be like, let's get just parody law in this. Like, clearly, like these are all
it's
mock-ups or
there's,
something. I mean, I played
Steam,
Carrotville. I had no problem playing Carrotville in there.
Right? Yeah, Steam's great sometimes, and then sometimes it's not great. But yeah, for other stuff though, for like narrative stuff changed very drastically over the course of the game. Like, I don't think there's the Kelly and Matt breakup that wasn't in the original doc at all.
Really?
That was created to like help you feel more invested in Matt's struggles and stuff, and to kind of set a precedent for your eventual breakup with Emily or Evelyn, as like kind of stuff just kind of pitters out. And then there's the Travis and Brad character in the first chapter, who's like going to the party and is like maybe going to be a threat, and that wasn't in the original. That wasn't in the game until like the last few months, because the first chapter just wasn't like hooking people into the story, so we put that character in there. So it's kind of really interesting, because like the narrative is like with puzzle pieces, and you kind of just reorder them and you move them around to like get the right flow and get the right relationships kind of building over the course of the game.
Did the pandemic kind of really affect you at all, or because you're kind of like a one-man shop, things didn't change too much for you there? Yeah,
I think things didn't change too much for me, because like I don't go to an office and I don't do that kind of stuff, so that was kind of nice. But like I definitely see a lot of game devs here. I like to demo my game a lot, so the inability to kind of get those resources that I had relied on previously definitely affected how long this game took to make. Also, I think there's the whole element of like collectively we all went through this like terrible hardship of a year. Yeah, just awful. Yeah. And like sometimes sitting down to write like fun 2008 jokes wasn't really my mood. So yeah,
that's fair, man. That's fair.
What are some of your favorite? What are some of your favorite Easter eggs that you've kind of peppered in the game? I found a handful of them playing with the keywords. I hadn't found the one of you until I saw it in Cam's Let's Play. So I appreciated
I just stumbled
that was
into
in
it too. Yeah, I just stumbled into it. I was like, "Is this It's Kyle? What's up, Kyle? Found your profile, bro. What's up?"
My favorite stuff was definitely the websites I added, like the 2008 websites, because a lot of those they don't even exist anymore.
Yeah.
The Rain ASMR website.
Yeah, exactly.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah, we call it ASMR now, but it wouldn't have been called ASMR back then, right? My favorite one of those is definitely the Hype Machine, which is like a music blog aggregator that I put in there, because that's something I used pretty much daily in like 2008 to find new music and stuff. And music blogs aren't even really a thing anymore. So
yeah,
that was kind of fun to like.
That's been something for across the series. As somebody who's never been too much of a music guy, like the clear focus on music, I almost feel like I'm an outsider, kind of like peeking into this world, because when all the characters are like, how do you find new music? I'm like, I top 40. I listen to whatever's on the radio basically, and I feel really bad. But you're gonna bring new things to me. In a similar vein, how like. Was there any kind of like concern of like copyright stuff? Because like obviously we've basically we kind of made a call early on of like, well, we're not gonna bother with really playing any of this music for our like recorded versions of them, because they'll just get like DMCA'd and we won't be able to upload the videos and stuff. Is that something you cared about?
Like 10. Yeah, I had like 10 seconds of a song in mind. We got like. That 10 seconds got claimed.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Our the part one of Cam's Let's Play, it cannot be seen in Iran, Syria, Cuba, and North Korea. The video is just blocked in those countries. It's fine everywhere else. It's probably getting monetized by somebody else. But so we kind of made the call of like we'll maybe check those things out, but we won't like pull in the audio or something like that. Is that something you, as especially as like streaming has grown over the course of the games, is that something you cared about really at all, or you were just kind of like, I'm gonna pull the songs I pull and streamers be damned?
I mean, yeah, definitely. It was something I considered. I even considered like trying to do like a streamer version where the songs would be royalty free or something like that instead. But I think I just ended up doing it this way, where it's like, yeah, like streamers kind of know about DMCA and stuff, and so they won't listen to the music, or if they do listen to the music, maybe it's on Twitch and they won't upload the VODs or anything. You know, it's also a thing because it's a concern because, you know, streaming nowadays is such a big way for people to get their games shown to a larger audience. But yeah, I think inevitably just giving it so streamers can kind of have their own take on if they want to include music or if they don't. It's kind of up to them. And then in the end, like the players get to see the 2008 music references and they get to like have those emotional connections.
Yeah, I mean, that's I can't imagine how the game would work with like royalty-free versions of those songs or whatever, because so much of it is like you hear that song, it's immediately back in time. Like when 303 comes on, I'm like, oh, I have not thought of this song in 6 or 7 years, but yep, there we are. Or Katy Perry, I Kissed a Girl in particular was one that like I remember exactly where I was when I first was hearing that song, in a weird part because a girl I went to high school with married into the name Perry and became a Katy Perry, and so I heard that song and I was like, is this the Katy I know? But it was not. But yeah, like so seeing those elements in the game, I was like, yep, that's I can't imagine how the game would feel without them. In a similar thing, I don't remember what video it was, but like one of the videos we went when we were playing the Emily is Away 2 one of them just was no longer there, was no longer uploaded. Is that something you are kind of ever going back and checking or updating?
Yeah, I have a list of all the URLs for all the videos from all the games, and every once a month or so I'll go through and make sure that they're all up. I've kind of neglected 2 with 3 coming out and everything.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
That's
Probably
fair.
a few
That's fair.
videos that need to be updated. But yeah, I mean that's a growing concern, and some of them even during the course of development, like I had to do a check before launch because some of those videos had been copyright claimed and stuff. It's kind of weird because in 2008 you could just upload music to YouTube.
Yep.
Yeah,
You know,
you could
and
upload
that was
anything
it.
to YouTube in 2008, man.
Yeah.
2008
Or
was
just lyric
awesome.
videos or Moody Rain videos and all
Yeah,
that
the
kind of
lyrical
stuff.
videos are like great because it's like Windows Movie Maker, and they just put the lyrics up when the lyrics happen. You're like, yeah, this is great.
Yep.
What a good vibe.
Yep.
Yep, totally awesome.
I can karaoke.
Yeah.
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 I did have a question in particular. So, in Emily's Way 2, Emily has a like serious indie vibe, Arctic Monkeys, Snow Patrol, like soft rock, indie stuff. She goes way more indie in this one, but then Evelyn has just been pop punk, Warped Tour style rock and roll this entire time. They each made a transition in this game to a different genre of music, with Emily going into electronic music and Evelyn going into hip hop. I was really shocked by that because I'm like, these are completely like musical
That's
clashes.
not what you're supposed to do.
Yeah, I'm like that. Like the transition in that is insane. What inspired you to be like, yeah, halfway through the game, I'm gonna have them just like totally change musical interests, and it's greatly leaned on their friendship with this other person that you don't know, who ends up becoming like your romantic rival. Like, what was the like dichotomy and kind of progression in that concept, and then executing it in the game?
Yeah, so I think throughout the whole series, music has been such an intimate part of your relationship with these characters. In 2, you get sent playlists. You can like listen to the playlist while you're talking to them, and same thing in 3. And 3 even has the aspect of at the beginning you can choose to either like hip hop or punk more with Evelyn, and then that switch will still happen. It'll just happen in the reverse way. And that switch is there to kind of promote this idea that the character that you're talking to is maybe changing a little bit. Their interests are changing, they're ending high school, they're kind of thinking about other things, what they want to do with their lives. So that change is there in genre to be a marker for their personality as a whole changing, and maybe in a way influenced by their new friendships with Jeff or Steve or whoever.
I will say, I do find it interesting on that note, and it's something that Cameron in particular is very vocal about the fact that, like, I feel like I have such a different interpretation of, like, Jeff and Steve than at least Cam, but maybe even Trevor too, where, like, and maybe it's because, like, I deliberately didn't ask as many questions. Like, I didn't want to. I just trust it. And, like, when Matt was like, "Let you be me," and I was like, "All right, I'll do this begrudgingly, I guess, because I have to." And I was like, the minute it's like, "All right, you can leave," I'm like, "Let's get out of here then." That, like, I never really viewed them as, like, a romantic rival as much as, like, yeah, like, this is just someone that, like, Emily or Evelyn are friends with, and, like, maybe, obviously, maybe they did do stuff. Like, maybe they did fall in love or whatever. I don't know. But, like, even when you have the ability to, in Chapter 5, like, ask about that and be like, is it because of Jeff or is it because of Steve? I was like, it's not. Like, because, like, for me, by that point in time, it was, like, it was a way bigger thing, right? And, like, especially after listening to you now, it's like, yeah, like, these are people who are in their senior year of high school again, right? Like, that needs to be repeated. Like, there's so much change. They're 17 to 18 years old. And I think they were going to change no matter what, really. Like, they were going to change no matter who walked into their life, no matter who sat next to them in a math class or whatever. And I think Jeff and Steve, to me, were such a classic example of like such a good red herring to me is how I always read it, with like, I don't buy it. I don't buy this, right?
Yeah, no.
This is a test, is a trick. And so I was like, hey, like, I mean, I just trust their, like, I'm gonna ask him, like, hey, like, who is Jeff? And she's like, oh, he's like a friend in math. And I'm like, cool, that's enough, right? Like, I did find it interesting. I think Trevor pointed out in our spoiler cast, where, like, if you send him a friend request first, he, like, won't respond to it for an entire chapter. And I was like, oh, okay, so he's, like, maybe a dick, but, like, either way, like, he's fine, right? Like, I'm not too worried about him.
I was so chill with it. Like, I was like, I trust her 100%, not a problem. And then the friend request that gets sent is, hey, any friend that's a friend of Emily's is a friend of mine.
Cameron's,
it's like,
so, yeah.
Hold on, brother. Hold on. Like, let's set some let's set some clarifications. Let's set some boundaries. Boyfriend, friend. Boyfriend, friend. I like that she has a friend who's different, who's introducing her new music. This is great. But, like, that was, for me, that was the red flag that I was like, I trust Emily implicitly, 1000%. I do not trust Jeff. And I was right not to trust Jeff, but I also understood that, like, Emily made these choices and these decisions that lead up to the breakup. And she consciously had those feelings. And because she never vocalized them to me, that to me is like, oh, this relationship really is done. Because if we can't communicate these problems that we're, like, because, like, you're blindsiding me with all these problems you say that are in our relationship, but I haven't, like, we've never talked about these before. And at what point does, and this is kind of like a big takeaway that I have for the game, is if you have one person in that relationship who's not willing to make these communications clear from the get-go, especially when they start feeling this way, and, like, that's super typical for being 18 in high school, like, 1000%, you're like, they're like my soulmate, I love them, but I'm having these feelings about this situation. 1000%, I get that. But, like, it comes down to, like, the key component of communication and relationship, that if you felt this way and you feel this way, for me, a break's not going to do it. Like, this isn't a break, this is a breakup. Because you couldn't communicate to me that your apprehensions and your problems, despite the fact that, like, throughout this entire game, you're like, I love you, you're my best friend. Then why didn't you tell me, Emily? Why didn't you tell me? And it's like, that's like a big takeaway for me on that front. So, So I was really curious, and I kind of had a follow-up question to tie into Logan's question, or like his inquiry about Jeff and Steve. Are they us from Emily is Away too?
Ooh.
That's a great fan theory.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's interesting.
Because the position that they're
super
in
interesting.
is the same one. Like the same one on the outside, the friend on the outside.
That's an interesting theory.
Like
that's
I
an interesting parallel.
like when I started like digging into it in chapter 5, when I was like looking at the photos of them at the electronic concert, and I'm like, I'm like, holy, Jeff just made me from Emily is Away too. Like this
Can
happened.
Galaxy Brain take this whole thing?
I'm the Jeff in this game.
Yeah. For me, it's really interesting too, Cam. To that, like, to piggyback off something you just said there as well, which is that like you were right not to trust like Jeffrey Steve, and like again, like I'm like, but like, were you right? Like,
well,
I'm so.
I will
I'm so
say
curious
I felt very like, because I was very much like you, Logan, the first time through. I was like, I'm not gonna press this. If it is, fine. Even though I've got like my own personal baggage that's like leaning me towards like thinking that Jeff is probably a problem. But it was very then weirdly vindicating playing the second playthrough and pretending and confronting Steve, and then Steve just like being a jackass about it and like signing off with like a little heart when you try and basically like talk to him, and then like I loved Evelyn getting annoyed with him, and that was basically how like that was like the big twist in like the differences between those endings for me, was like she had like, after I'd kind of confronted her about it and said like, hey, like maybe this guy's, you know, into you or something like that, she just gets annoyed with him, and basically like he tries to hang out or something. She's like, yeah, I'm just trying to ignore him and like make him go away. And so there was a very like clearly he was interested in her, at least via that playthrough. And I found like that very like weirdly cathartic, even though again, like I felt a little icky about being and like pretending to be Matt to like get that ending.
Else, yeah.
My hang up about Jeff really comes from, and this is really the core aspect of it, is his Facebook status at the end of the game, which is, it looks like I got my swag back.
All right.
And I'm just like, oh, like, I just like, I can't comment on it. I can't do anything about it. Like, it's like he gets the last word. He gets the last turn of the knife. Like, he gets it. Like, he wins. I lose, but at the end of the day, I won because Matt said I won, and we hung out on the beach that night and proved that our friendship was the real victory.
It's so interesting to hear you guys talk about this. Like, this is so cool. Like,
I'm like, yeah, we've barely let Kyle talk.
Yeah,
So
sorry,
awesome.
sorry, Kyle.
No, for real. Like, it's great to hear you guys and your reactions to the story and everything. I think, yeah, because for when writing these, I wanted like to allow for a bunch of player reactions to Jeff and Steve, right? For it to be interpreted in a bunch of different ways. I think from my writing of it, I wanted Jeff and Steve to kind of be, you know, people you were jealous of, or people who you might see as threats, and maybe they even have feelings for your partner, but at the same time, it's like, in a realistic situation, like, what are you gonna do about that?
Mm-hmm.
You know, because like you can't be upset with your partner based on how someone else feels about them, you know. And I think it's very common to be in a relationship with someone who, you know, that they have a friend or something that obviously wants more, and that's just kind of how it is. And maybe that makes you feel uncomfortable, and you can talk about that. But I also don't think it's realistic to kind of hold that against your partner if they have a friend who likes them, because maybe your partner's just great, and like, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the ideal
Hopefully they
option
are,
would
yeah.
have been something like, it would be like 4. It's not that I don't trust you, it's that I don't trust him because I don't know this person. and like that's the conversation I would like realistically want to have, but that like obviously for narrative purposes isn't necessarily a reason or an option you're going to give us.
And like as an 18-year-old, are you really like some of the
Yeah,
options
no,
that
that's
you
very
give
much.
are,
I'm playing this as twice
as
the age of these characters at this point.
Yeah. No, that's definitely like, I was like, I would not want to say any of these answers because I'm a grown adult man and I would not respond this way to this confrontation. 18-year-old me would have definitely picked the absolute worst one that's on this list, 1,000%. yeah, I don't like him because like he's a friend who wants to get in your pants. Like I'm like that is 1000% the wrong answer and 1000% the answer I would have given in high school.
Yeah, it's interesting for me. Something I kind of thought a lot about while playing Emily's Way 3 and kind of getting to the end and how things settle, where I think, again, it kind of touches into the theme of like, yeah, like both of you can be good people. Both of you can be 18-year-old people who are just trying to figure their lives out, right? And like neither one of you can necessarily be good or bad. And also tying into the idea of like not all loves in your life have to last forever, right? Like not all love needs to go on forever, but they can still make a huge impact on you, right? Like I left that relationship and was like, yeah, like obviously this isn't ideal, but like, you know, me and Emily still had that time together, right? We still had those moments, and they're not made any worse because of how it ends. They're just more finite, basically. But those moments, I think, are still important, right? And those relationships are still important, right? And like, especially in high school or even in college, right? Like, those relationships you have with people, those connections you make, right? Like, whether friend or otherwise, I think are all so important and so intense. I feel like, and even though certainly in terms of relationships, like on a romantic sense, most won't work probably, but even like on a friendship sense, right? Like most of your friends from high school or college, you're probably not friends with, like a good amount of them still, right? But like they're still just as important, and they were still just as clutch in those moments, right? Like whether or not I'm still, you know, best friends with Matt in 2021 is sort of irrelevant, because in 2009, right, like when you needed him, he was there, right? And like that relationship was so important and so clutch. And so like I loved the fact that the game kind of dealt with that idea as well, of like, yeah, like these relationships might be fleeting, but that doesn't mean they're not equally valid and equally important.
Yeah, for sure. Like the highs you feel in like chapter 2 and chapter 3 are still
Yeah.
the highs, you know? And
Yeah.
I also like what you said about the idea that there's not necessarily a bad character. You know, like there's just people who are just being people, like
Yeah.
in real life, you know? Like Emily maybe changes over the course of the game, and you can't really fault even in some ways Jeff, because like you know, let's, like you said, you were Jeff and Emily too. Like
Yeah.
you might have had a feeling for someone who's in a relationship and hope that something could still happen there, you know? It's just like people being people.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to Cameron's fan theory, I kind of like it too, just because like everyone is everyone's the hero of their own story, right? So yeah, like when you're playing as Jeff in Emily's Way 1 and 2, it's like, yeah, like I'm clearly better than the crappy boyfriend. And then when you have your roles reversed, it's like, I'm the boyfriend. I'm clearly better than the schmuck in math class. And then he's singing the same thing, because you're all obviously always the protagonist of your own story.
And I think it's
Oh yeah, go
common
ahead,
for us to be in either character in those situations too. Like in life, like I've had experiences where I have been the friend on the outside, and I've had experiences where I've been jealous of someone else, even when I'm in a relationship. So
one of the elements I really enjoyed about this game, we've touched on a little bit here and there, is that we got to see what happens between the chapters thanks to the news feed.
Yes.
And I thought that was a really great use of that, as well as like the pictures and all that stuff. I guess how did that develop over time, and you know, was that one of the ideas always kind of from the beginning, that you got to play with more throughout the game, throughout development?
no, so that was, you know, originally I was designing the menu, right? So I was gonna have the chapters, and you click on the new chapter, and then it kind of made sense for the menu to be the timeline from, you know, Face Nook parody, and then it was like, oh, I could put stuff in the middle, and I was like, oh, I should definitely do that. I should definitely put stuff in the middle, and I feel like that's so much of what game design is like, you know, when you initially think of an idea, it's like not realized at all. So like you don't know how everything feels, how everything interacts, and when you're developing it, that's when you can find the stuff like allowing for those stories in between every chapter to really tie the chapters together. And most features, I think, in games are designed that way, where like you have a vibe, you have an atmosphere, you have a system, and then you're like, oh, I could do this and make it even better.
Yeah, I really like, I love just getting to see kind of just those in between moments, especially that were very like noticeably absent, I would say, from the last two games, especially the first game where it's like a year between conversations each time.
Yeah, absolutely.
So at least getting to like everything, of course, being kind of on that condensed timeline, and then getting to see glimpses of those in between moments here helped much more fill in the story for me of like, okay, like here's where we're at in our relationship. It's not just, fresh faced off of Halloween anymore. It's we're now at Christmas time, so we've got these pictures of us together. Clearly Matt and Kelly have had some stuff go on, and so yeah, like I just loved like how that informed everything. So I love that came just naturally through the process, through your process of developing and kind of improving upon the game.
Yeah. I think that feature is very crucial to telling the story as a whole, and it's interesting how absent it is from my previous two games. Just like that transition, because you can tell so much in like you were even saying when you're going into chapter 5, you kind of realize that something had maybe changed in your relationship just based on that stuff in the middle, and then how Emily presented herself initially. So,
yeah,
I did have a quick question in regards to so in Emily is Away 1 with the year-long transitions that I often felt like I pointed out with Trevor, I made that joke earlier about like, you got her wasted in your dorm room, dude, like you took advantage of her. And like I really wanted to bring up, so there's a series of choices, and at the end, like, it tells you how many people made this decision and these choices. And like the percentage of people, Trevor got the 0.2% of people got this like cool ending because they were scumbags and pretended to be mad. I'm joking. I'm in the middle of a playthrough where I'm about to get to that chapter, and I'm 1000% going to do it this time. But there's a choice that I thought was going to be more impactful in chapter 2. Or it might have been chapter 3, actually, now that I think about it, because it's after the two of you are together, I think. It's the breakdown between Emily and Evelyn's friendship. Because at the beginning, they're still, like, shouting, lyrics at each other.
Song lyrics at each other.
Yeah, across their Facebook statuses. And so, like, clearly they're still looking at each other's Facebook profiles. And it's like, hey, like, all of a sudden you can ask, like, hey, what happened? And I talked to Emily, and I'm like, I think Evelyn's probably feeling a lot of these same feelings. And you should definitely take some time to talk to her about it. She's like, okay, like, I asked her, we're going to meet up and talk about it. I'm like, great. I totally thought that was going to come back and play in later. And then Kelly and Evelyn ended up becoming BFFs forever, wifeys, etc. Like, that ended up happening with that. And I'm like, was there ever going to be more of an intricacy with the fallout of their friendship and possibly rekindling of it? Or was this always just like a, hey, they were used to be friends, they're not friends anymore, but you can go ahead and help them, like, make peace with that, and then that was it? Like, I'm really curious, because that was always, I felt like it was going to be a linchpin, and it ended up just kind of like being window dressing. And so I'm a bit curious about that decision.
I think there are some endings where if you're with Emily, that Evelyn will kind of come in and be a friend to Emily. So there are some endings where that does come back around.
Okay, cool.
But based on the endings that you guys have gotten, that doesn't really happen because the partner that you're with already has new friends, already has that emotional support. So there are some endings where your partner is devoid of that emotional support and needs someone else, and an old friend will come back and kind of step in that role.
So if we're dicks and say you can't be friends with Jeff and Steve, that's what happens?
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting too.
That's interesting. I was super fascinated because I was like, I totally thought this was, and then it popped up in the ending thing, how many percentage of people like helped them reconnect their relationship. But I was like, I felt like that would have been like more of a narrative point, and I'm glad that it is in other endings. I was just super curious because like I felt like it just dropped off out of nowhere. So,
but
I went and asked you about it.
Yeah, I liked how it was handled, because I think it, for me, like, furthered the idea that, like, these are all people living their own lives, right? And, like, I'm just not getting updates on how Emily and Evelyn are doing after that, right? Like, they've made peace. Maybe they're, like, rekindled their friendship and are doing stuff together. Maybe they're not, but, like, they're doing that on their own time, right? And, like, again, in the same vein of, like...
And what time does she even have to do that if she's spending so much time with you? Like, how is... Like, that's... I mean, that's...
Right?
Like, that was
that's
the very
another thing.
realistic thing for me, is realizing, like, in Chapter 4, I haven't talked to Evelyn since Chapter 2 because I've been with Emily this whole time and, like, didn't need
Or
that
doing
other
dumb shit with
friendship
Matt,
or something
right?
like
Yeah.
that. Yeah. And which
like,
was very very realistic to, like,
Very
life, where I'm
realistic.
like, I get into a relationship and like, it becomes the relationship, and the friends are still there, and we hang out occasionally, but way less so.
Even more so in high school, right?
Yeah.
For me, where it's like,
No, yeah,
you're
1000%.
here, you're in class all day. You get out, maybe you have a job you go to, like a part-time job you're doing too. And so it's like, like, in my off hours, I'm going to hang out with my girlfriend. I'm going to hang out with who, like, my best friends are, right? And so it's like, these other friends I have, again, it goes back to the, like, they kind of come in and out of your life, right? And all of the characters, I feel like, kind of came in and out in a very natural way, where it's like, like, I'm not going to keep track of what you're doing all the time. And even, like, Matt, who, again, I grew a lot closer to in my playthrough over time. At the beginning, it was like, when they were like, oh, Matt kind of sucked, and was like, I mean, sure, probably, like, he seems like a bro guy who, like, again, a bro friend I would have that would kind of, like, be cool and also kind of suck at the same time. I'm not shocked by this revelation, right? And, like, it wasn't necessarily true, but, like, I wasn't close enough to really challenge it either. I was just like, that checks out. I'm sure he is, right? And I liked the idea that all of these... And again, but that whole conversation between Evelyn and you, where you talk about Matt, happens with Evelyn doing that kind of on her own. And then she comes forward to bring some information. Again, it's just these characters living their lives and coming forward to you at these key moments. And so, to me, Emily and Evelyn rekindling their friendship, or not, but just, like, reconnecting... For me, it felt very natural, very real. I'm just like, okay, they did that, and then, I don't know how close you are going to get after that necessarily. Maybe they become best friends again, maybe they don't, right? In the same vein for me of, like, the end of the game, where Evelyn is the one who reaches out about, like, coming to, like, the summer party kind of thing. And I was like, like, I would love to, right? I haven't talked to you in so long. Let's do that, right? And also I just need to get the hell out of the house after a breakup, right? And so it all felt like, like, they're still there. They're just living their own lives kind of on the other side of school, like Finkus and Boy Meets World, right? Like, it's just they're doing their other thing.
Oh, that's a good point. That's the Finkus.
Thank
The
you.
Finkus on the other other
you.
half of the high school. That's a good
I also like the idea of, like, giving the player choices that don't necessarily have narrative consequences, but are more about how the player wants to go about, how the player defines themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, an example of that is in Chapter 3, when you can either cancel your date plans to hang out with Matt after his breakup, or keep going on your date. That doesn't actually impact, like, no matter what happens at the end, Matt will want to hang out with you and cancel his own date plans with Anna to hang out with you.
I told him not to, but he still ended up coming to hang out, and I didn't see Anna in those pictures. So, like, I just don't think that ended up, like, I know he did it for me, but, like, bro, that's how I know he loves me. Like, that's how I know this friendship's
that's how
real.
you know that he's, like, your true friend, but you can choose to either be there for him or not be there for him, and it doesn't affect how he is, his personality. It affects your own personality. So are you going to be the type of person that will cancel your own plans to help a friend or not, is kind of the choice there in Chapter 3.
Yeah, and it
Dude,
just made
I
me
was
feel
gonna
like
be
a
hanging
dick
out-
in Chapter 5 when
Yeah.
he was like,
Yeah,
no, I'm
exactly.
going to hang out with you. And I was like, oh, I
Yeah.
picked the girl over you earlier. Now I feel like an ass.
Yeah, but also, let's remember, we had a date with Emily in her basement by ourselves. Like,
I mean, well,
a
you
big night.
apparently
I
did.
was
spelling it
like,
out for us here.
My date was like, we were going to go drive. So it was like,
oh yeah, and then park somewhere, Trevor.
Eh.
The purpose of driving is to park somewhere. Like, let's be real. Like, we all had a priority of getting laid. That's what we were out for.
It wasn't even that for me. Like, it was, like, obviously part of it was, like, Emily's way too ahead of being like, I don't know what might be, like, the
linchpin that's
thing
going
that
to kill
trips
me.
her up. Yeah, exactly. So it's like, I'll lean towards this, but also it was me trying, again, talking Matt through everything. And again, I think that whole conversation with Matt in Chapter 3 is so well done. But, like, getting to the end and being like, really think that was the decision in the game that I thought the most about. Like, was actually like, do I break the date with Emily or do I go hang with Matt? Like, what kind of decision do I pick here? And trying to thread the needle in a way of being like, all right, cool. Like, I've got plans with Emily tonight. I don't want to break them. I'm gonna hang out with you tomorrow. Matt kind of gave like his like emo answer and was like, I don't love that, but like I really do mean like I will jam tomorrow kind of thing. And so it was funny for me when you talk about how like it didn't really matter what you do there in terms of like what happens online, because when he put his Facebook message after that of like, chapter ends, I'm a sad boy, basically, Matt. And then I'm like, I literally audibly said it. I was like, fucking Matt, like, come on, like, I'm trying
Dude,
out here.
I thought Matt was gonna kill himself. I thought that's where it was going. I was like, oh, please,
Jesus,
don't die,
Cameron,
Matt.
real dark.
I don't.
No, but like,
want
I was just like, man, like, that sucks. And so when in chapter 4, it's like you and Matt are still tied. I was like, lit. Okay, we're all good then. It's all fine. Everything worked out okay here.
I have a question for you, Kyle. When you kind of look at the big picture stats of how people are playing the game, are there any choices that are surprising you in like, oh, the audience really leaned into this route? I was expecting them to go the other way.
Yeah, I think in a good way. I think because obviously in chapter 4 you have the option to whether be faithful and trusting or to be kind of toxic and tell Emily to not be friends with Jeff or Evelyn to not be friends with Steve anymore. And a surprisingly few number of people go the toxic route, which is kind of helped restore my faith in humanity.
Yeah.
Because like
Good
most
job,
people,
everyone.
I think like 80-something% of people go the trusting route.
Oh, wow.
Which is like a huge majority, yeah.
Yeah, I have my I took snapshots of like both of my endings, and I'm looking at the Emily ending right here, and it's saying like you and 77% chose not to intervene, and then on the Steve side, it's like you and 5% chose not to intervene over Steve. So yeah, there's like 83% there, I guess, 83% between the two of those. So yeah, it's I had a similar thing of like you and like basically across the two is like you and 96% of people encouraged Evelyn and Emily to be friends again. It's like, yay, good for all of us. We're all good people.
Yeah, people being good people.
Yeah.
Nice.
I did have one thing I wanted to say. You have what is potentially not only an incredible Easter egg, but an Easter egg that is a massive troll. The announcement for Emily is Away 4.
Yeah, it's a troll.
It's a troll.
It's a troll.
I mean,
it literally
clearly,
leads
since
to
it's a literal Rickroll.
It's a literal Rickroll video. I was like, it's in the recording. I have it in the recording. I'm like, I can't believe it, guys. Like, we're gonna. Actually, I think I might have been in the one that I didn't have audio.
No,
on, so
it's there. You freak out about it, and then he Rickrolls you.
and then you Rickroll me. You literally Rickroll me, and I'm like, I'm so stoked. I'm like, I found it. This is awesome. I can't believe it. There's gonna be a number 4. Oh my god, Rickroll. But it leads into kind of a question I have. Like, I'm not gonna ask you if there's gonna be a 4. But I am going to ask you, like, you still, like, this game just came out. Is there going to be a 5? This game just came out. Like, what are your plans? Like, what's next for Kyle Seeley? I was going to come up with, like, a cool thing to call you.
The guy. I'm just a guy.
The guy that fucks with my heart and my mind. Like, what's
nostalgia
next?
developer Kyle Seeley.
There you go.
I mean, I don't know.
Are you gonna somehow tap into the '90s and we're gonna play something back in like Windows 95 era?
That's a great idea, honestly. I mean, I think at this point it's clear that like I love the 2000s and I love like interface games and I love narrative stuff. So I think probably something along those lines. If that's Emily's Away 4, Emily's Away other spin-off title or something else. I'm not sure yet.
I know you and I had talked at one of the PAXs. You had this like affinity for T9 texting and stuff, and I was talking with Logan about that, and I was like, I think since we've had that conversation, I've played things like A Normal Lost Phone, and I'm like, oh, Kyle could totally do a phone game that is like you having to actually go through and like text on your phone to do those things. So I think that'd be.
I have been making a prototype of that game you're talking about. It's a T9 game. So yeah, that might be something potentially, but
Yeah, because it's I think that checks all of your boxes really.
Yeah,
and then
pretty
I can just imagine also then playing like a version of Bejeweled in there or something like that, like I did on my old flip phones.
Oh,
Hell
I'd kill
yeah.
for that.
Yeah, it's interesting too that question came because I mentioned this. I think me and Trevor have talked about this a little bit, where it's like I got to the end of Emily's Away 3 and like it felt like such a like the natural building point to like where the entire series has been going. To where I got that and was like, yeah, like this feels like the natural ending of like the Emily's Away like trilogy of games that like set around like this kind of time period and this kind of topic and this character first off in Emily, like kind of not even getting ever really a chance in the first one to kind of maybe getting a happy ending. If you're me, you didn't in Emily's Way 2, but still just kind of chasing after it to like finally get in that relationship and seeing what a relationship looks like in all of its good parts and also all the kind of flaws in a relationship that everyone kind of naturally comes with. And then kind of get into that point at the end where more likely than not, you're going to kind of go on a break or break up at the end of this game. And you've kind of experienced like the full relationship journey with Emily over the 3 games. And so I get to the end and was like, oh yeah, this is like such like an obvious natural ending point that we've been building towards for like this entire series of like, this is the relationship with Emily from beginning to end. And so for me, it is like so exciting to see like, yeah, where do we go next, right? Like, do we move away from Emily? Do we do a text-based game now to bring back 2009 Misery on that level? It's a really exciting idea in terms of what the future looks like going forward.
Yeah, I've often made the comment, I wanted to try to find it, but I didn't have the time because it didn't occur to me until like 2 hours ago.
Just now.
Somewhere in this trunk, just off to the side of this camera, is my detailed charts of every possible decision.
Oh, you're psycho. Yeah, I forgot about this. Yeah.
Of every possible choice you can make in Emily's Away 1. And the ultimate conclusion is like, I found it it kind of occurred to me a little while ago, and it just reoccurred to me when you brought that up, Logan. I often like make the joke like Emily's Away has a War Games ending. The only way to win is not to play. Where the only way to, and this is a weird way to say this, and there's probably a better way to phrase it, but the only way to win and then lose is to play in Emily's Away 3. Because you end up, like, the best ending is where you lose, technically, according to the goal and achievement of 1 and 2. You achieve that goal, and then you lose. But what you get out of losing makes the game worth playing. And I felt that was was that intentional on your part, Kyle? Or is it just coincidental, like, that's just the thematic narrative, like, the nature of that thematic narrative?
I mean, from a themes point, I've definitely wanted 3 to be a game about being in a relationship more so than 1 and 2, where the games are about kind of before you become in a relationship. But I think what's really interesting, and it even comes back to the Emily's Way 4 stuff, is like this whole progression wasn't like something that I had planned, right? It's just kind of like just what happens when you make stuff, right? You make something here. In 2015, I made Emily's Away, and that's kind of how I was feeling at the time. And then through making that game and through thinking about my life and experiences I had since then comes Emily 2, which is a more mature game, kind of dealing with the same themes. And so it's a progression, but a lot of it is just like a happy accident, right? Where it's like, this is just kind of like how I'm feeling on these platforms and what I kind of want to talk about based on the reaction to my past work. And that when you peel back and look at it, it like makes a progression, it makes a line, but like when you're in it, it doesn't, you don't see the line. And so I think that's like a big point of like what is in the future, or even what you're saying now, is that like a lot of it is just kind of like stream of consciousness stuff, and it's kind of just about, as a creator, creating the thing that is true to you at that time.
Any final questions, Cam or Trev?
How did you? Because I had completely forgotten about this. Like, what kind of research did you do in like that era of like Facebook and all that stuff? Because I had completely forgotten about like the birthday gifts
That's
and
a good
stuff like that.
question.
Oh, yeah.
And then they pop up, and I'm like, oh my god, yeah, this was totally a thing we did.
The poke.
Yeah,
the
I
poke
used a
wars,
lot of
yeah.
like web archive stuff to view the actual interfaces, and because
Yeah.
Facebook changed so much even
Yeah.
within the years in their UI and stuff. But then thankfully, a lot of it is conversations with friends that I had in high school, and like, what do you remember about the platform? Like, oh, I remember like you can give panties as a gift, and like that
So
was like the
weird.
thing you gave
Yep.
because that was so funny, you know. And so like, thankfully, I still have friends from that time that I can talk to and kind of remember this kind of stuff, because a lot of it is just kind of like put back there, and you never think about it ever again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I would say same with like all the little Easter egg sites you put in there. Like I love the EGN one, and the Greg scream singing.
Yeah,
that
when I
was
found
fun.
that video, I was like, "Fucking got it!
Yep.
I got it!" I was like, I know exactly where this is going.
Nailed it. Yeah, and even that like your hype machine one again. I didn't have any kind of recollection to, but seeing like, you know, an IGN from 15 years ago, I was like, yep, I remember going to this site, and they're like great at the time, but terrible in like any kind of retrospect, like babe of the day things. And I was just like, oh my god, the internet is just a terrible dumpster fire that we have lived through. But yeah, just seeing those things, there is just like, I mean, I imagine it's like the Wayback Machine kind of stuff. And I haven't checked, but like as we've been talking, I'm like, is there a texts from last night Easter egg in there that I need to go and find? Because like I remember that being like iconic to the time or something like that.
Yeah, there's not that, and there's a lot of stuff that I wish that I could get into the game that just never, like Honesty Box was a huge thing on Facebook that I wish I could have gotten in, but never.
Right.
So there's like, I have a list of all the stuff that like, oh, maybe in the future,
There you
something
go.
like that.
Nice.
You did put the personality like match quizzing in
Yeah,
there.
the compatibility
quizzes, like
Yeah.
oh jeez.
Yeah.
And also,
I mean, like even just the
Emily's
surveys,
notes
it
and
was like
stuff, jeez.
I definitely have some of those like long dormant things in my profile somewhere on
my
Facebook,
Facebook,
and have not
Yeah,
thought
I
about
remember
them
those
in many
being
years.
so important
Yeah.
too. Like
Yep.
reading
Yep.
your crush's survey, being like, oh, am I in here?
Yeah,
Does she have a crush on
exactly,
something?
yeah.
The note, like the different notes that like Emily has. It's like, I'm not going to read your entire note, Emily. Like,
Oh, I did.
I read the whole thing.
That's
Yeah.
like
I know,
when
I ended up reading it.
I
but, like, you know,
hate watching Cameron play this game. By the way, I gotta say that.
Trevor's been
Because I talk about it, like he'll play and like new posts will just kind of like pile up and he just doesn't click on them. He doesn't
click on
like
them.
check anything
Maniac.
out. He's just
Yeah.
that's
continuing
how I
with the
used
conversation.
Facebook
I'm like,
back then. That's how I'm using Facebook now, baby. That's what
it drives me insane.
Terrible. Yeah.
I'll see them when I'm gonna check them all out. I'm not gonna just like let them all pop up.
You've
one by
totally
one. Like,
missed
that's-
things. I've watched you totally miss things.
It's like editing your videos, like
Like you go and click to another page, and then you come back and you have no idea what the new things that popped up, because at that point they've refreshed onto the feed and stuff. And I'm like, you completely missed how what you said affected this thing that happened or something. And yeah, it's infuriating watching you play, Cam.
Hey man, I play it the way people used to run Facebook. Like my mistakes are the mistakes that real people had in real time. All right.
Sure.
I think on that note, we will wrap it up. Thank you for joining, Kyle. It's been an absolute blast and a pleasure to have you on.
yeah, thanks so much for having me. This has been so much fun. You know, getting to talk about the thing I made for 3 years is kind of awesome. So
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. So if you like what you heard, you can go check us out over at patreon.com/thatnerdysite, first and foremost, like all of our wonderful patrons have. You can also go like, subscribe, share with your friends on all the podcast services around the globe. Rate and review us on iTunes. Give us 5 stars. Kyle came on the show. Come on now. And just go tell all your grandmas and friends and whatnot about us. Otherwise, you can go find Cameron at Rev Cabot. Are you still Rev Cabot
Yeah, I'm still
on
Rev Cabot.
Twitter? Okay.
Yeah.
Cameron, anything you want to shout out or plug?
Yeah, youtube.com/thatnerdysite. The Let's Plays of Emily's Away 3 are up there.
There you go. Go check that out.
And also check out Trevor's Let's Plays of Emily's Away 1 and the co-let's play that he did with Logan here for Emily's Away too.
You're gonna get all the Emily's Way plugs today, Kyle. You ready for it?
Hell yeah. I'll send you your
Trevor,
commission check.
Oh, there we go. Right, yeah.
Wait, there's commission.
You can go find Trevor at Trevor J Stark on the internet. Trevor.
Just kind of echo all that. We got a bunch of Emily's Away stuff up on the site, including our spoiler cast. You can go check out that, and yeah, all the stuff we do on the YouTubes.
You can go find me at Lefty Logie or Lefty Logie, Logggy on the internet. I will also be a corporate shill and give all shout-outs to the Emily's Way content we have up on the site. And then I'll also give a shout-out to myself and Trev just did, in the last few days, Times of Flat Circle episode for Patreon exclusive, going over what makes a good James Bond movie. That was a lot of fun to dive back into like 2002 again. And so go check that out as well.
Wasn't that like 3 days ago that you guys recorded that?
Again, I have no idea. And the pandemic time doesn't exist.
It's true.
I think it was, I want to say it was yesterday, but it was 2 days ago, I think, actually, Trev.
I think it was it was Wednesday, right? Yeah.
Oh, God, was it really?
Yeah.
Okay, well, whatever.
Yeah, because Trevor recorded the Mighty Ducks animated series.
Yes. Yeah, I did that Thursday night, so yeah.
Yeah, you can go check out an entire month of just Mighty Ducks content as well. You can go find Kyle at Kyle Seeley 23 on the internet. Kyle, do you have anything big that's come out recently you want to just give a shout out to? I don't know.
Yeah, you can check out a little game called Emily's Away Less Than 3 on Steam. And then check out That Nerdy Site, because these guys are awesome.
Oh, hey, there you go. We did not pay him that much money to say that.
Now the commission equals out.
Yeah,
exactly.
I'll keep the check.
Otherwise, you can go find That Nerdy Site at That Nerdy Site all across the internet. For myself, for Cam, for Trev, we are, again, very, very thankful to have had Kyle on and talk about all things Emily's Away and 2000s nostalgia with him. And until next time, play your games and be good to each other.